Now, John, are you getting any deja vu with the Omicron variant? And if so, deja vu back to when?
Well, you're mixing up French vocabulary with the Greek alphabet. But look,
As one
I,
does.
I have to say I do agree with you. It feels a lot like the initial concern around Delta. We know now, because Delta's been with us for a long time, we know that it is considerably more contagious, perhaps, than some of the initial variants that were around, and yet less deadly, resulting in far lower hospitalizations. And indeed, that data was available even before the vaccine rollout kind of reached a meaningful level. And so, even amongst unvaxxed, Delta was never as deadly as the initial stuff. And this appears to be even less deadly than Delta. And of course, everyone who wants to be vaxxed, presumably, is now vaxxed, and for that matter, they're also boosted. So I don't think Omicron in of itself is going to be disruptive. However, governments are reacting to it in ways which are disruptive. And so I think the real concern here is that some governments, and in fact, it's a growing number, it would seem, they've kind of slipped into this bad habit. When in doubt, assume the worst, which might sound benign if you're the person in power, but if you're the
Yeah.
person trying to run a business, especially in hospitality, travel, these businesses that are based entirely around human to human contact, including sometimes with large crowds, it's disastrous. I mean, how many
Yeah.
times are we going to go through this? So I think based on just reading the tea leaves, as it were, this will be disruptive, but I'm not sure it needs to be. And it's kind of sad, really, if you ask me.
It does feel like governments have kind of got into a rhythm with this, and it's
Yeah,
not. It's maybe
yeah.
not the best rhythm, but future we don't know how bad it is. And some people would say, well, they're getting their deja vu is even before Delta. This is before even we even knew what coronavirus was, and we all just thought Corona was a form of lager. And back in 2019, when everyone was all hyped up for whatever 2020 was going to be, and it was a horrible surprise in the end. So some folks think, maybe this is we're leading up to a March 2020 event. Do you think there's any evidence to support that? And of course, we are just looking at this from an investment level, where you've got lots of interesting dynamics in play, rather than, of course, from a pharmacological perspective. We're not in the pharmaceuticals business.
Well, look, I mean, even though some, choose your index, some equity markets had crept to new all-time highs before this recent scare arrived, but momentum is not what it was. And price, sort of profit expectations, earnings momentum are not what they were. The equity market has been carrying a heavier load in recent months anyway, prior to this most recent scare. So the idea that we could go through a major market event comparable to spring of 2020 based on Omicron alone, I think is unlikely. Based on an overreaction by governments, more likely. And actually, if I had to pinpoint what I thought was the most likely reason that markets are going to reassess here, it actually has more to do with what Fed Chairman Powell said earlier this week. That, to me, is actually more meaningful than Omicron, or at least for what we've seen so far, government reactions to Omicron. I think that is the reason why the market should be afraid here.